Hey everybody. In this video I am going to show you how to use CSS to change the shape of some of your elements on your page and also how to add shadow to the elements on your page. I'm going to start off with shape. So typically the stuff that you've been making has had pretty um, right corners. They're sharp corners everywhere. The buttons that you've made have had sharp corners or rectangles or squares. Um, Say that you want them to be a little bit softer, round it off a little bit. Well, there's a property called border radius that will do that for you. It's really easy to apply. Here we've got my blue container div and one white button, and I'll show you examples there. So here's my container div ID there, and all I have to do to round off the corners is type border radius and then a number. I'll start with 10 pixels so that you can see a little bit what happens. I'll save it and go over here and watch this corner there. See? The corner just got shaved off, and that happened on all four corners, right? And if that isn't enough, if I want it to be even more round, I can change it to, let's try 50 pixels, right? I'll save my change and go here. And there, now it's really rounded off, right? It's still relatively rectangular. And if I change that from 50 to 250, now it's kind of an oval. And I can even go up to, I don't know, 450 or so, and refresh it, and it becomes even more of an oval. There'll be a certain point where the number will get as high as it'll go, and it can't make the shape any more round. Obviously, I've hit that point here. I can change it to 1750 even, and you'll see that my shape doesn't change. But if I were to have an element that had the same height and width, I could eventually make the border radius until it was actually a circle, complete circle. So anyway, I don't want an oval though. I want kind of a rectangle with just slightly rounded off corners. So I'm going to go back to 15 pixels, and yeah, that looks pretty good to me. So there's my div. And I can do the same thing with this Google button here. You'll see I'll do border radius. Uh, Maybe I don't want to do 15 pixels. Maybe I want to do 7. Let's try that. Refresh, and you'll see, oh, yep, it's not quite what I want, so I will try adding a few pixels, and we'll see. I think that's pretty good. So you'll notice this looks more like the typical button that you see on a web page, right? It's not that rectangle. It's got rounded off corners. So on your nav bar, if you have buttons, you might consider using border alias to make the buttons look a little bit more like real buttons do. So in addition to the one number here, you can actually do 4 different numbers, one for each corner of your element. So the way it works is border radius property, each number corresponds to one corner if you use 4 numbers. The first number will be the top left, second number will be top right, third number is bottom right, fourth number is bottom left. And I can show you that pretty easily by making this a big number. I'll do 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 120 pixels. And you'll see the first number, top left, will be rounded. Top right is 0, so it'll be just squared off. The third number, bottom right, will also be squared off since it's 0. And the fourth number, 120, will round off this bottom left corner. So let's refresh it. And you'll see, I did that on the button. But here it's rounded on the left side, top left and bottom left, and on the right side it's all squared off. That might be useful for you if you want to have an element up against the edge of your screen, so it'd be weird if it were rounded off on one side. Or if you wanted to make some kind of interesting looking shape, you could do opposite corners rounded off. So I'll save this and show you. See? So it's kind of an interesting looking shape there. And you can play with it a little bit and say, oh, that's a little bit too rounded off, so I'll save this, and maybe that's good, or maybe, I don't know, I want to only do a little bit. Anyway, so that's the border radius property. If you prefer, you can also do each individual side with its own properties. So let me try getting rid of this border radius, and I can do border top left radius. Let's do 50 pixels. And you'll see that it'll only do the top left and everything else will be left alone. See? And of course the same thing goes for border top right radius, border bottom right radius, and border bottom left radius. So you could do all of those separately, but I think it's easier just to do all of them in a border radius property. But it's up to you. So why don't you pause this video for a second and open up the HTML file I gave you, or open up the Star Wars CSS HTML combo or your web page and try adding a border radius to an element to experiment with it. Try changing the pixel sizes of the border radius to see how it affects the image. Just take, a minute to play with it, then come back. Okay, so I assume that you've paused it and tried experimenting with it. So now we're going to move on to shadows. So one of the problems with the basic CSS is that the stuff can look kind of flat, and that's where shadows really come in handy. One of the ways to give your site a little bit of visual flair is by adding a shadow to the elements. So the first one I want to show you is box shadow. Let me show you how that works. What the box shadow does is it adds a shadow to the div or element. Let me see. So basically what you do is you type in box shadow and a few numbers. I'm just going to type them out. 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 12 pixels, and then the color that you want the shadow to be. And I'm going to do gray. I'll tell you a little bit more about what each of these things does in a second, but I first want to show you what it looks like. Oops. Save it and go over here. And did you notice how there's a little shadow that runs right along the outside here? So let me tell you a bit about what each of these things does, and I'm going to change this to 5 pixels as well so that it shows up a bit more. So the first one of these numbers here, the first is the horizontal offset. That basically is how far to the left or to the right the shadow shows. If I do a negative number, the shadow is going to move to the left. If I do a positive number, the shadow will be cast to the right. So let me make this a bigger number, like 25, so that you can see that shadow move over. Do you notice that? So it's as if the light source is further to the left, right? You don't necessarily want to have a huge offset for your elements. It kind of depends on what you're going for, but if it gets to be too big, it doesn't look like a shadow anymore. The second number is your vertical offset. So a positive number will be as if the light source is coming from the top going down. If you do a negative one, it'll go in the opposite direction. Let me show you what I mean. I'll save it here. I'll refresh. And you'll see now the shadow is going up. Typically, I think most of the time, the shadow usually comes from the upper left cast to the lower right, like this. So people basically use positive numbers. The size of your shadow offset is totally up to you. I think I'm going to do 10 and 10. So there, that looks good to me. Now this third number here, what it is it's the spread. So basically, I'm sorry, it's the blur. So the blur is how strong the shadow is. So if I do 1 pixel, say, then it's going to be really, really solid. And that can look actually a little unnatural even. But if I make it 10 pixels, did you notice how it kind of blurred over here along the edges? So the higher the number, the more blurred out your shadow is going to be. And at some point, it kind of doesn't exactly look like a shadow anymore. The nice thing about the shadow is that it gives the image a little bit of depth almost, you know, it makes it seem like it's not just flat. Now there's actually a fourth number you can type in here. If I do another 10 pixels here, what that number is it's the spread. It's the shadow size. The bigger this number will be, the more the shadow spreads out. See? So if you make it too big, once again, it looks a little ridiculous, but um, you can tweak that number if you want to try to affect the size of the shadow. Or you can just leave it blank. For me, I think the default is usually okay. And once again, the last uh, value is the color of the shadow. Now, I could make the shadow red, for instance. That looks a little weird, but you can do it. Or I could make it, you know, a light blue or something like that. Um, Whatever your fancy is. I think typically you could do like gray or light gray or dark gray, and that looks most like a shadow. Once again, buttons are another useful place for shadow. If I do a box shadow on here and I make it kind of small, you know, 5 pixels all around, and let's make this one light, oh, dark gray, or heck, I'll just do gray. I'll save it and refresh. Oops, I forgot to add my semicolon last time. And you'll see, oh, there's a shadow, but it's a little too big. So I think I'm going to do 3 pixels. I'm going to get rid of this one. And let's see. Oh, too small. So it was just that spread that was causing me a problem, I think. So let's go back. Okay, so there's my shadow on the button. It kind of makes it look like it has a little bit more depth. It's nice. Last thing, you can also add shadow to text. So what that does is it makes it, once again, not seem quite so flat. It's not even necessarily totally visible. Like sometimes the text shadow is just enough to make it look a little bit different without being really noticeable. So to add text shadow, instead of typing box shadow, you type text shadow. And you don't have the fourth number, you just have the 3. So it's the horizontal offset, the vertical offset, and then the amount of blur you want, and the color. So I will save that. I'm doing this on the word Google here. And you'll notice not much change there. Oops. Let me save that and come back over here. So let me try changing the color to blue and really making this offset big so that you can see it. See? Now the shadow is really obvious, right? You've got this blue, it's kind of offset by quite a bit. That's a bit too much for me. But if I do, 3 pixels, there. Now, it's still visible, but it's just a bit different. And if I move this back to light gray, you'll see that if I zoom way in, you'll see that there is a shadow there. It's just faintly visible. If I make it gray, so that it's easier to see, now it's more visible and even still a little too offset. So I'll change that and refresh. And if I back out, you'll see, like, you can't really tell it's there exactly unless you zoom way in. But if I remove it and save it, you'll see, hey, that looks, I don't know, maybe not quite as good depending on the way you look at it. So these are a few different tools that you can use to give things a little bit more depth, kind of make them stick out, make them look a little bit better. What you'll need to do is just experiment with this a bit. Try messing around with the values and do it with something that you don't mind changing, or make a copy of a file and just try fooling around with all this stuff until you get it right. Thanks, guys.